Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, I should say. It's Mark Bradley here from LMN. Today, we're going to talk about creating a hiring process to build a winning team. So to get started, what I'm going to kind of talk about is job ads. I think this is kind of where the problem starts, so wanted to start here in the discussion. So I think what this time of the year we get busy and often we get behind on hiring. Obviously, this is a very different year with COVID, but I'm going to kind of talk about the more typical scenario for the purpose of this webinar. So we put our job ads out and we start hiring, and our ads often look pretty simple. We've got a wage range that might be, on the lower end of the spectrum, kind of targeting the entry level positions. And we often give short, vague descriptions like this one here: building patios and walkways, or planting trees and shrubs, laying sod. Not a really exciting job ad by any means. But this is kind of the norm in the industry. This is what people put out there to find great people. And you can imagine this type of an ad just doesn't really appeal to really great people. This kind of an ad kind of appeals to people who are just looking to get a paycheck and maybe solve an immediate problem. So I think what happens, next is we put these ads out and we hire people that are kind of crazy enough to apply for that job ad. And, as they get to the job, a whole series of things follow that are also a little lackluster. So first, people apply, they get the job, and they arrive first day on the job, often to go straight to work. So they don't really get a proper orientation or any real introduction to the company. And their first interaction with the company is showing up at the yard early in the morning and kind of asking around and trying to figure out what and who they should be meeting. And, kind of embarrassing, but true story. My early years in landscaping, my job ads looked just like that one. And anybody who would apply would more or less get a shot. And often they were just interviewed over the phone, and we'd say, okay, well, show up at 6 in the morning and see Mark. And so I'd be at the yard and running in circles trying to get things going, and they'd show up at the yard. And if, I kind of considered that part of the interview process, if they could get out of bed and get to my yard by 6, then they were on the right track. And I always had a box of t-shirts in the back of my pickup truck, and I always kind of joked if I threw them a t-shirt and they were sober enough to catch it, then they were hired. The problem with that mentality is you end up with a lot of confusion, and this is, I think, what kind of happens from there. So they show up and nobody's really too sure why they're there. There's usually some sort of a talk to that guy. It's usually the boss or the foreman, owner of the company. That new employee didn't get any onboarding. They rarely get any training, and they're kind of told to get to work. So they hop in a truck, they head out of the yard to go to work somewhere. Again, lots of confusion setting in. Nobody really gives enough information to that person, so it's kind of an uncomfortable situation. It's a tough way to start your first day on the job. And I think what starts to kick in pretty quick is those employees start asking themselves, what exactly is this job? Is there any real future opportunity? Is this something that I really want to be a part of? Company seems kind of crazy, not so sure this is for me. And I think this is where, a lot of the turnover starts to kick in the industry. First off, we didn't hire probably the ideal candidate with that job ad, but now we've kind of pushed them through this horrible onboarding process, and they're starting to give up. So they're questioning whether this is even a good company to work for, if they're getting paid enough, or if they're even going to get a paycheck. They kind of come to their own conclusion that there's no future, and they start looking for another job that pays more. And I think, this is why we lose so many new employees in the first 2 weeks, because there's just a lot of turnover as a result of this poor hiring system, I guess, if you want to call it that. And obviously all the confusion that comes along with it. So, we look at the industry and we say there's a labor shortage. There's high turnover in the industry for sure. I think it's primarily because of what we just showed, but I'm going to expand on that over the next hour. We don't invest enough in our new hires. There's really not any identifiable career often in a lot of the landscape companies that make up the industry. And, I think the result is people either sort of quit or leave for a better opportunity, or they get fired because they don't sort of meet the expectations. So I think it kind of starts with a recruiting plan. How are we going to recruit our new employees? Where are we going to find them? Are we going to count on referrals from our staff? Are we going to count on job ads? We should have a good website or a section on our website or Facebook page specifically set up for hiring. And then, we might want to even include some signage to try to get some interest in some potential new employees as well. So, step number one, I think, is you should be hiring year round. There's never a time of year where you shouldn't be looking for good people, because I think in most companies, there's always a few to replace, or there's usually the need for some more staff as the company grows. So this is a concept that I first learned in the book Winning by AK Welch, former CEO of GE. In the book, he talks a lot about differentiation, and he talks a lot about sort of identifying people using this kind of simple model, which is the top 20%, the middle 70%, and the bottom 10. So the top 20%, these are kind of your high potential people. Often you can identify these people right from the time they come into the company. It's just like in sports. You can usually see who the potential star players are from the first time you see them. It doesn't take long. Usually within a few weeks, there's just certain things, attitude, attributes, personality, that really tell you if that person has the potential on their own to go far in your company. And I think these people, we need to put an extra effort into training them, incentivizing them, and rewarding them, because these are the people that allow you to expand and grow in the future and get better as a company. They're the people that I think you really want to count on to finish your sentences day to day in your business. The middle 70 are incredibly important, not to be overlooked in any way, shape, or form. These people you want to train and develop to become A-level, but often there's many of these people who are going to be more relaxed and pleased and satisfied being in the middle 70, and that's okay. Not everybody wants to really lead a team or lead a division or a company. But these people get the work done every day of the week. They're super important in every organization because they're kind of the doers. We need these people to execute the work. We want them to be as skilled as possible, so we want to put as much effort into training them and creating career development plans and whatnot for them. We want them to be seeing the company for what it is and really understanding what the objective of the company is each year, both in terms of financial performance and other types of growth. Now, the bottom 10%, this is where I really, I think, fell in love with that book, was the concept that, there's probably 1 in 10 in every company who needs to be replaced. And they are not always, it's not always obvious. It's not always the sort of lazy laborer that just isn't keeping up with the rest of the crew. Sometimes there are people in the company who have advanced and grown with the company, but are not going to stay the course. And I think, you know, I saw that over the years in my companies, where as the company scales, some people don't necessarily want to scale with it. You can do your best, and as an owner, you know, you need to put a lot of time into keeping those people close, but inevitably sometimes there's turnover in the middle to upper layers in the company. And this holds true for, you know, a company of 5 or a company of 50 or 500. Often when the company sort of changes, there is need for some turnover in certain people who are just not contributing to the company in the way that they're needed. And it may be best for their career and the company if they move on. So this 10% rule, I think, needs to be something we pay close attention to within our hiring process. So over the years, I kind of always tried to figure out what people wanted. How do I keep them and how do I get them? Those are sort of the two big questions. So in looking at this closely over a long period of time, this is sort of the list that I personally feel has the biggest impact. So what do people want in a career? First off, they want a purpose. I think everybody wants a chance to make a difference in their job. They want goals. They want a clear understanding of what success looks like in the company. There's nothing more stressful than going to work every day, not really knowing whether you're contributing or not really knowing if the company's successful or not. They want responsibility. They want a manager who delegates and then steps away long enough to let them learn on their own and be creative in the way they approach their work. They want the freedom, which is, you know, really just an opportunity to create a path to sort of a successful future the way they see it. And as owners, I think it's important to note that we can't control that necessarily. Every individual that works with us is on their own path. I'm a big believer that people don't go to work for companies or other people. They go to work for themselves and at the very most their families to support their own families. But ultimately, everybody goes to work each day for themselves for their own reasons. They don't go to work for great leaders or companies as their sort of primary reason for going to work. That is an important piece, but it's secondary. Everybody's primary reason is for themselves. Then they choose to go to work for a good leader and a great company. The attention, I think this concept of providing feedback and then giving some guidance to improve the results if there is need for improvement, making opportunity clear, understanding how an employee can move forward in their career and really understanding what those improvements need to be in order to move forward in their role. Providing transparency, I think, is paramount. If you want somebody to be successful, you have to measure and you have to share that in an honest and transparent way. And I think the more you share, the more likely the team is to commit to working not only for their own interests in the company, but for the company interests as well. Because I think it's much easier to see how the success individually comes as a result of company-wide success. Compensation, I'm a big believer in a higher base wage than average, with opportunity for more even beyond that. I'll get into that a little bit further in a few minutes here. Stability, I think in this industry, particularly in the areas where there is winter, unfortunately, employees often feel uncared for once winter hits. You hear owners say, well, I don't want to do snow plowing, or I can't make money in the winter. I just, close the doors. And I think that's okay if that's the way you've decided to run a business. But you do need to consider how you're going to take care of your employees and provide some stability. And this day and age, unemployment insurance just isn't enough for most people to maintain a middle class lifestyle. So being a little bit more creative in how you approach that problem, I think, is important. And last but not least is this concept of the employees feeling like the company actually cares for them and that the company will have their back. And I mean, in times like this right now, with what's happening with COVID-19, now more than ever, this is going to be the most important thing that we business owners are going to do in our businesses. What we do now for our employees will set the stage for what they do for us over the next 10, 15, 20 years or the rest of our careers. This will never be forgotten. So I think having a good understanding of how to manage that on a person by person basis is pretty important. So the hiring process itself, it looks like this. It's pretty simple. I think I was early in my career, third, fourth year in business, I was starting to get super tired of the turnover. The business grew very quickly. I had lots of employees. I was always hiring. I had an incredible amount of money getting wasted on defective work and rework. And I really started to think I had to fix this problem. So I put some time and effort into it, and this is what I came up with. And over the years, I used this to build the team and keep the team. And it really just started with putting out a job posting that was meaningful, writing job ads that described the company and described what we were looking for, why we were kind of looking for it, and where we were going as a company. With that job posting, rather than always putting in the starting wage for that role, which may be very well what we're looking for, what I started to do was to show the entire wage range. So if the starting wage was $15 an hour, but the foreman earned $35 or $40 an hour plus fringe benefits that may bring them up even into the $50 range, I would often put the job posting out with that full wage range so that I would describe the role and then say it varies between $18 and $47 an hour. And what we would see is an enormous number of applicants at all stages in their career for that type of a role. And the reason is obvious. They would see the entire wage range. But better yet, even the entry level applicants that we would get would be much, much better applicants because they could see the opportunity that they could have within that career. If you're looking for new employees, I think calling it an apprenticeship rather than a laborer also has a huge impact. When we would post for a landscape laborer versus a landscape apprentice, we would get incredibly different applicants. People are looking for a career versus just a paycheck when they apply to a apprenticeship. It's a very different set of people. I would see often people from I operated right in Toronto at the time, and I would see people from outlying areas. I always loved hiring kids that grew up on farms or grew up in more rural communities because I always felt that they sort of had a little bit different exposure to good old-fashioned work. So job posting comes up. Next up, we get the pre-interview. Pre-interview is something that I decided I wanted to develop because I hated booking one-on-one interviews and having people not show up. But I didn't realize what an impact it would really end up having on the business. What happened was we would put these job ads out, people would apply, and we would respond with a 5-page questionnaire for the applicants to fill out. And it was kind of humorous, some of the responses. Some people would get upset and call us names and whatnot for even thinking of asking them to fill out a 5-page document to apply for a job. And obviously, it goes without saying, those are the people we didn't want. And we sorted it out just with an email, much easier than hiring them and finding that out, a month, 2 months, 3 months later. So the pre-interview has all kinds of difficult questions. These are questions like, what would you do if your boss assigned you a task, but then another more senior employee came along and assigned you another task, both to be done by a certain time frame. And if you knew you weren't going to be able to get them done, how would you handle that? Questions like, describe a time when you've had to deal with a really difficult boss or coworker, or a time when you've had to deal with a really difficult customer or that was really upset. These questions kind of tell you a different story about your applicants than, reading their. And what I found was, by using the pre-interview, we would really narrow it down super quick and in this sort of analyze phase. And then when it came time to interview, it was almost a formality. We were more or less just meeting to kind of make a deal to get them to come to work. And then once we hire them, there's an employment agreement. There's a good understanding of what the first 2 weeks is, usually a working interview, and followed by 3 months of probation, and then sort of a more official position. And then they really sort of hear a clear understanding of what that career path looks like out of the gate. And then as you onboard them, you can invest in training and really know that you've got the right person for the company, so that you're confident in making that investment in training. Because I think most people are just nervous to spend money training staff because they're worried about them leaving quickly. But, the old saying is, what's worse, not training them at all and them staying, or training some people who happen to leave. Obviously, we don't want untrained staff on our team, so we have to invest in training. We just need to make sure we have the right people before we start to make that investment. When you're building that job ad or website, I think you have to realize that you're selling your company to potential employees as the ideal place to work. This is a career decision. This isn't a summer job or a way of filling a cash flow void to pay the rent. This is a career. So you need to, in your job ads, you need to have very good job titles. The descriptions need to be good. They need to be exciting. You should list some qualifications. I like the wage range. I've seen that work really well for myself and my company. And then sell that vision of a career, what it looks like and what all the opportunities are. I think it really will have a huge impact, probably more than anything else. And it's so easy to do, but most companies just don't start here. Once they get into the organization, they should really be able to understand what their career path looks like. And I think, showing the different roles and how to get there on some sort of a graph or pictograph helps. And definitely when they're applying and you're meeting with them in person, or putting things on your website or your Facebook page, these things can help as well. So just, sort of show the different roles that exist in your company. I'm a big fan of a standard wage program. I think it really helps people understand what the opportunities are and how to kind of transcend in the company. So, show your roles with the hourly rates. I would advise to use levels, and for each level of each role, describe what sort of skills are needed, the skills and training or certifications for each level, as opposed to just having year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That can be a pretty slippery slope, because sometimes people just feel like they are due a raise just because they've been with the company for a number of years. And I think it's important that you get something before you give. And for that reason, I think the levels are super important. Otherwise, you might have somebody who's working, first year working with you, who's, more qualified and putting a lot more effort into upgrading than somebody who's been around for 3 years and they're just sort of getting paid a different wage based around time served. I've always kind of said, well, it's not jail. We don't go on time served. We go on skills. It's a career. So we should pay people what they're worth, regardless of how long they've been on with the company. So this is just an example of that. The position, general labor, will have B-level requirements and A-level requirements. Now, these forms and documents are in the systems library. They're all fully customizable, so feel free to build your own. But sometimes I think as owners, we have to change our approach. The traditional mindset in the construction and landscape business, I think, has been limit the wages, keep the costs down, and you'll make more money. And my experience with that has been the opposite. I've found that if you pay a little bit more, you get skilled labor, and they'll drive more sales and productivity because they have the know-how to do so. When you look at other industries like plumbing and electrical, well-seasoned, long history of apprenticeship programs and certified trades, you don't really have to worry about the plumber coming out and not doing the job right if they're certified, because they're certified. And in the landscape industry, unfortunately, that hasn't been the case for as long. It's certainly changing in a lot of areas, but I always feel that having more skilled tradespeople who are more certified, they cost more money, but they can get a lot more work done with a lot less supervision, and the overall impact on the business is always better, because you can scale up with certified skilled workers and you'll never scale with low skilled employees, because you have to watch everything they do. So the question is, should we be paying more? What happens if you pay somebody a little bit more money? Now, this is just an example. Wages vary a lot, state to state and country to country. But let's just say if we had a foreman who was making $20 an hour, or 24, or maybe even 28, what type of person could we attract with the higher wage? Now, I think it's easier for me to hire trades from adjacent industries, or really good managers from other industries, and sort of provide the specifics needed to be really good at doing the work in landscape, than it is to try to always create. So in other words, I want to create my own foreman, but if I can bring them in sort of the middle 70, as I described earlier, at a pretty solid wage, and then train them for a short while and get them into a foreman role, that's going to be a lot better than me having to produce every foreman over a 3 to 5 year term. So an example might be if I found a great stonemason who was an independent contractor, and this happened to me many times in my own business, we'd hire them to do some subcontract jobs, but then it wouldn't take me long to suggest, hey, why don't you come to work with us? We can pay you what you're charging, plus I can give you a truck, and I can make all that evening and weekend work disappear because we have infrastructure. So your lifestyle will improve. And I would always be able to do that confidently, knowing that their skills could be leveraged with more staff to produce a lot more revenue. And because our overhead was low, we could actually pay them more and make money where they probably couldn't. And this chart sort of shows that. So at $20 an hour, with overhead costs of fixed versus $28 an hour, I'm paying an additional, from 66 to 72, I'm paying an additional 10% in wage, which, ends up to be 11,600, which sounds like a lot. But the neat part is with more qualified staff, I'm making more money as well, because not only do they get more work done, but they make fewer mistakes and they manage their crews more efficiently, and they're doing all the on-the-job training with the other staff. So they just become more efficient, particularly if we sort of create some other methods of creating some incentives. Some of these other things that I think you can offer, often with benefits specifically, I think lots of landscape company owners seem to feel that they can't afford benefits, or they say things like, oh, well, I'm too small, I only have 5 employees. And I'm a big believer that we need to sort of advance the landscape industry into the realm of other more organized trades, like electricians and plumbers and carpenters and whatnot. I feel like we could do a much better job of making it a destination career if we include these things. And when you think of the cost per hour of these things, like benefits, they're often not as expensive as you think. And I think that's why it's so important to have a budget and a sound estimating system, because you can capture these costs and make sure that you're not losing money just because you've introduced benefits. These things really set you apart from other companies. And I think more than ever, benefits are important for our industry, because I think over the past 35, 40 years, as a lot of the traditional union manufacturing industries like automotive and textile industries, for example, have moved offshore and into other countries, a lot of those kind of middle class careers have disappeared, and we've kind of replaced our economy with this service economy. The problem is entry level jobs and new careers are not offering what those careers offered in the past. So I think what we're seeing is, the middle class is shrinking, and for us to kind of attract the middle class to come to work in the landscape industry, we have to recreate what those manufacturing careers had in the past. And we have to do that by having benefits. We can't just expect that people come to work and suffer for an entire career. They need dental and vision care and things like long-term disability. They need to get paid year-round. They need career development, some pension planning. There's all sorts of things that we could offer that would make this career a little bit more appealing to the type of people that we really want in our companies. When we hire them and onboard them, I think it's pretty important that a few things happen. First, we need a company handbook. There has to be policies and procedures. There has to be some understanding of what the job planning looks like in your company, what they should expect every day when they go to work. There should be an employment contract. It needs to be reviewed by a lawyer. This isn't something you should just create yourself. You can get yourself in all kinds of hot water by guessing on this, and often leave yourself in a position long term where you're out of pocket a lot of money without having a good employment contract to protect the company. Team training. What does that look like? What are the job processes? What is the safety policies? What specifically do they need to have to operate equipment, and how do they use the technology that you're using in the company? And then what are the day-to-day procedures? You know, what time do you show up? What time do you leave? How do you pack up at the end of the day? When do you fuel your trucks? Where do you fuel your trucks? Where do you go to the washroom? There's so many questions that a new employee has. It's important that we have some training to kind of get those questions out of the way so that they can focus on being good contributing employees. A staff training program needs to be in mind. Obviously, you know, with LMN, we've got software training and certifications on the LMN Academy. We've got webinars like this. Greenius is a fantastic product for health and safety and equipment operations type training. Super affordable. If you can't invest that in your company, or in each employee, sorry, then you have to ask yourself if they're worth having at all. Back to what I said earlier, you want to make sure you hire the right people so that you have the confidence to invest a little bit of money in them, but you have to do that. You have to invest that money in your staff if you expect to really leverage the people that you have. Being members of associations and all the great training opportunities that many of them have to offer, apprenticeship programs if you have them available in your area through the government, and if not, create your own. There's nothing wrong with you developing your own apprenticeship where people can transcend from, you know, kind of year one to a foreman. Equipment certifications, Caterpillar dealerships and others provide great certifications on different types of equipment, often at very low cost. Certainly something that is worth leveraging. And then if you're trying to develop leaders, one that I used for many years was the Dale Carnegie program. They're available in just about every city, and it's proven technique to kind of build leadership qualities and really sort of unlock people's potential in that regard. Your staff, when you hire, I think the way that they come into the company and get onboarded is super important, but what they see once they get there, I think, has the biggest impact on the outcome. And that, you know, you can't hide the reality of your company. It's either organized or it's not. And I think if you want really high performing, efficient employees, then you have to create an environment for that to be possible. And that often just involves your operational setup. The one thing that I found to be super valuable in doing this was the 5S system, which is kind of a lean management concept. Toyota made this probably most famous. I read a book way back early in my landscape career called The Toyota Way, and it kind of motivated me to really look at how to run a more efficient company and engage other people to kind of maintain and create that culture. So, you know, starting with 5S for organizing your yard, your shop, creating labeled locations for everything, whether it be in a truck or a trailer, getting your yard set up where there's standardized places for parking, doing things like fueling, staging materials, and then set up all of your technology in a way where everybody understands it, and take the time to train them so they know how to use it effectively, so that the field staff and the office staff can really communicate the information needed to capture all of the billing and all of the job costing information so that you can make good decisions moving forward in terms of estimating and pricing work so that you know what makes sense and what doesn't for the company. And really, this is where LMN was born, was out of a need that I had in my own business to really develop an efficient operation where both the field and the office could communicate paperlessly. So when you start up a project, some certain things need to happen, I think, in order to get consistent success in your business. You can't start jobs a million different ways. I think every job needs to start the same way so that your employees know what's coming and they can really sort of react to what is needed in a more streamlined way. But when you hire these new employees, as they come in, they can start to identify very quickly what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and why it needs to be done. This isn't, systemizable like McDonald's. We can't create a screen that pops up that says I need 2 cheeseburgers. It's not going to be that easy, unfortunately. I wish it was, but if it was that easy, I don't know if the opportunity to be so great and so profitable in this industry would be there. The reason I think that efficiency will build big profit in every company is others are not efficient, so they're pricing their work as inefficient contractors to make money. If you can just be 10 or 15% more efficient, then that's going to have a massive impact on your profitability. And I think creating these startup procedures are most important to share that vision and really get the most out of all of your employees, but particularly when you're hiring and onboarding, your new staff can begin to recognize the way the company works very quickly and offer a lot more value a lot earlier in their career with the company. So first off, we want to be able to share quickly how long the job should take. Most companies can't do this. We want them to know what equipment's needed, what materials needed with all of the details needed to do so. And we want to use a virtual job binder to really identify things like designs and specifications and pictures and whatnot of the job ahead of time. Now, obviously on big design build jobs, you're going to have printed drawings, but within the LMN app, all of this information is going to be stored for them to access from the field, because transferring paper back and forth is time consuming and it's often not there when we need it. One other, free product that I'm sure anybody on the webinar here is familiar with is the 4 o'clock 4. 4 questions every day at the end of the day, whatever that happens to be. I like 4 o'clock, even if it's not quitting time, because it gives the rest of the team time to react to these things. But ultimately, just picture every day at the end of the day asking these questions and getting meaningful answers back, not just typing answers to type answers. This transfers a world of accountability onto the field staff and really allows the manager, whether it's a manager or business owner, to do that, just manage and take care of the big things that need to be dealt with for the field to work effectively. So the field are filling this out, and a copy of it's being emailed to their supervisor or business owner. And the first question is, what are your top 3 goals or priorities for tomorrow? So they're setting goals. Question 2 is, what did you get completed today? We want to know numbers. We planted 22 wire basket trees. We put in 321 gallon perennials. We completed 8 stops on our maintenance route. Whatever that happens to be, we want some real details. We want to know what's slowing the crew down. So this question is, what's slowing down your progress? Give us details on these obstacles so that we can remove them. Don't just give us, basic information. We want to know what the problems are so that we can fix them. Because in my career, I know The worst, I used to spend a lot of time driving from site to site to site, and it used to drive me crazy showing up on a job site and hearing 5 reasons why they couldn't work for the first time. I didn't get a phone call or an email or a text. They waited until I got to the job. Now, if you aren't on your job every day, or if you happen to miss 1 or 2 days out of a week, if they wait to tell you what those problems are, they're definitely not working efficiently. We all know that. And then the last question, which I think is super important, is what do you need from me? And we've kind of broken that down into these 4 categories. What information is needed to work efficiently? What materials are needed and when? What equipment's needed and when? And what labor is needed and when? And the reason we want to prompt this at the end of the day is we want the crew to be having their own meeting on site, discussing all of these things to make sure that everybody, from the new hire through to the foreman, are part of that conversation in creating an efficient work plan for the rest of the day and the rest of the week. Foreman then can do a few things differently with all of this information in hand. They can let the crew know what their expectations are. They can set motivating goals. They can share the accountability with their crews, and they can really be transparent with their staff in saying when things are going well and when they're not. At the end of the job, we can review the KPIs and see if we hit the goals. Did the project hours come in on track? What were the problems? What could we do better in the future for planning and execution? And then create some improvements that will allow us to get better over and over and over. And I think, that end of the job feedback with the field and office is pretty important, but we do need to have some actual results in order to reflect. I think when there's no results, it's hard to reflect. And then end of quarter, review the sales and production goals, share any KPIs that need to be shared, and really sort of discuss the improvements on a more macro scale of what we need to do to get better. It might be the type of work we're selling. It might be better equipping ourselves or improving logistics on materials. There's usually some bigger issues to discuss. And then at the end of the year, I think on a crew by crew basis and company wide, just kind of sharing how the plan versus actual laid out, issue incentives and bonuses, and identify improvements as a group to get better. And then the last big piece on the hiring process is really providing that career development plan that's kind of backed with performance evaluation that kind of reviews the goals that they've set, grade their performance as an individual, create a plan for the future, set some goals for the next year for the individual and the company, and kind of roll through that on an ongoing basis. These documents that I'm kind of referring to, you can find in the forms library under Human Resources Systems. If you've got a Facebook or a LinkedIn account, we've got user groups on both platforms. It's a great way to communicate with other company owners. Ask them how they're doing things. You can talk LMN or not LMN, it doesn't matter. These groups are set up for kind of like-minded individuals to share and create a more peer-to-peer learning platform. And then last, we've got the many different offerings to advance your career as an owner or manager with LMN. First, we've got the LMN Academy online training platform. We've got the one-on-one support. Your account reps are there for you, every weekday of the year. They're there willing to help, and you can book one-on-ones. We just launched the virtual workshops, which are really focused around budgeting. Great way for you to kind of tweak your budget with all that's going on this year if you want some to kind of hone in on that specifically. And we've got the LMN webinars, which you're on one right now, And there's one coming up this Thursday at noon with McFarland Stanford, and it's really kind of focused on building confidence in your financials, and obviously something that's pretty timely right now with all that's happening in the world with COVID and the impacts that it's having on the landscape industry and many others. But certainly want to invite you to kind of take part in all of these offerings. And as always, our mission at LMN is to help great landscapers run great businesses. So anything we can do to help out with that, we're always here. But that's all for now. I'll take some questions to wrap up over the next 10 minutes or so, if there's any.
Hi, Mark. We've got a question here for you. What are some opportunities for providing winter stability? Our area doesn't receive snow, but we do receive a lot of rain over the winter and have minimal new work come in from December to February.
Yeah, and I mean, that's always a tough question. I think it's been one that's kind of flagged the industry for as long as anybody has been in business. And I think what we need to do is really develop ways of either putting staff on salary so that we can, and legal ways. So again, these laws vary state to state and country to country, but I think a salaried position is most sensible, and you can flex the hours based on the seasons. And in my experience, there's almost always something to do, even in the off season. It's just the way that you're planning that cycle, I guess, if you will. So, there's equipment maintenance and things of that nature in the winter. There's obviously some planning, and there's usually some company infrastructure improvements and things like that, which all take up time. And then there's always a lot of need for warranty work and follow-up service, which I think in an area like that where you can still work, but you're just not really filling the hopper, it's a good time to do your annual warranty inspections, and while you're out doing that, make some inspections on other properties that you might be servicing to recommend work that could be done that time of year, and really kind of shortlist the type of work that could be done during that wet or rainy season, and then try to focus on selling a little bit more of that to round things off. But in any case, I think if you can try to introduce a year-round pay cycle that involves salary type arrangement with flexible hours in the slower seasons, that seems to work the best. Now, again, you have to kind of check in and see what's legal in your area in terms of flexing those hours up and down, because overtime laws often impact your ability to do that.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. I've got another question here. What are your recommendations as a company is growing? It seems difficult to know what the right next step is as our company moves from 5 people to 8 people to bigger.
I'm not sure I know exactly where, but in terms of like people or hiring or finances, but I think naturally as a company starts to scale from even 3 people to 6 or 8 or 9 or 12, you're really duplicating something or replicating something that worked off the start. And the challenge there is, as an owner, if you're out doing the work with 2 or 3 or 4 other employees, you're kind of you are the system often. You make every decision and kind of call all the shots. And as you start to duplicate that and create multiple crews and scale up the company, the first thing that you'll notice is all kinds of little things start going wrong day to day. And that is usually as a result of the fact that you can't be everywhere at once. And that gets really stressful for a lot of business owners. Usually cash flow tightens up as a result, because it takes more cash to grow, so you're consuming more cash, but then also the extra crews are often not as efficient, and your systems aren't great for collecting money and getting around and selling enough work. So what tends to happen is the revenue per employee actually drops, and that is often pretty scary. And I think sometimes business owners don't identify that that's what's happening. They're not really sure. They just notice that there's no money in the bank. And then as a result, I think I hear this a lot. Well, I used to have 12 guys, but I didn't make any money, so I scaled back to 5, and now everything's great. And there's nothing wrong with running a company of 5 and keeping it there, but there is a lot more opportunity with scale. There's no doubt about that, because we're making money off of more people out doing the work. And if we make 10 or 15% profit off of every employee, then obviously there's more profit if there's more employees. I think the important piece that most people miss is they have to create some systems that replicate what the owner was doing with 1 or 2 crews, so that it keeps happening in crew 3, 4, 5, and 6. And those systems are often pretty widespread. I mean, it could be everything from the way you load and unload materials, the way you store your tools, the way you fuel your equipment, the way you start a job, lay out a job, the way you finish a job, all these little things that you know, the owner does instinctively are no longer being done automatically. They need to be sort of governed with a system. And I would say that would be the advice I would share there.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. Next question. Where would you enter training into your budget?
Training is generally an overhead cost. Right in your overhead budget, you should create a training cost. And, you know, if you've got 10 employees and you feel that, you know, you're going to take 50 hours for each employee, then that would be 500 hours at your average wage. And that would be the way that you would calculate what the budget is. And then any additional costs for training programs and whatnot. But I would advise to create a pretty healthy training budget. You know, obviously the best time of year to do a lot of that training is the off season with certifications and that kind of thing. But knowing that, you know, training is a year-round cost. If it's in overhead, it's being picked up on all of the jobs that you price. So your customers are paying incrementally through the overhead markups for you to have a continuous improvement mindset.
Fantastic. And the last question here we have is, where are the employee review templates that you had showed earlier in the program?
If you go into the systems library under HR systems, those forms and templates will be in there.
Fantastic. Those are the questions for today.
Your client success managers can help you out with that as well anytime. If you've got some questions about forms and documents, they can direct you on that too. But if you check out the systems library, if you're a pro account user, a lot of people don't really look in there very often, and I think sometimes overlook what's there. But there is a lot of forms and documents and flowcharts and training aids in that systems library that can really sort of help you accomplish the things that we've talked about today. I think that's all for today. So, and our time's up. So thanks again for joining us, and look forward to continuing to offer these webinars in the days to come. So thanks again, everybody.